pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving through the agenda to 3.02, the approval of the agenda.
I move the board approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Sandra?
Scott?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And into 3.03, honoring excellence this evening. Dallas?
Good evening, everyone. We're going to do another month of virtual honoring excellence, as I had a chance last week to get out and connect with some amazing young people and an amazing staff member. This year, as we've shared in some of our recent posts, has been just an amazing year for our activities. As earlier in the month of June, the Liberty Blue Jay baseball team won their second state championship in team history, so I had a chance to connect with a couple of those guys from that amazing team. And then also, you may recall, one of our school nurses, Kathy Wright, received some pretty special recognition from the Northland Chamber of Commerce earlier this spring. So, Rob, if you could roll that. We have two tremendous achievements to celebrate here in the month of June as part of Honoring Excellence. We first take you back to Saturday, June 5th, 2021, as the Liberty High School baseball team capped an amazing season that saw them exceed 30 wins as they knocked off CBC of St. Louis to claim the program's second state championship. With it, they became the first Kansas City area large class program to win a state championship in baseball in 15 years.
Just want to say thank you to the Board of Education for this award here, as we had an awesome season. I got Carson Milbrand here with us, and we just want to say thank you from the team and definitely the parents and the families that participated this year with our season. We are very grateful, and thank you for everything you guys do for us, and this award means a lot, as it was a great season in this 2021.
I mean, it was awesome. We had a few up and down little streaks that we had, but we worked really hard. And our seniors were great leaders this year, so we just kept on working and paid off.
A big LPS congratulations to Coach Bragg and the Blue Jays from Liberty High School. Several weeks ago, we shared with you the inspiring story of the nursing team at Liberty Middle School, and specifically their school nurse, Kathy Wright. At the annual Northland Chamber of Commerce Excellence in Education banquet held earlier this spring, Nurse Wright was announced as the inaugural recipient of the Northland Exemplary Service Award. Last week, we had an opportunity to personally present her with the award and congratulate her on this achievement.
Thank you so much, Northland Chamber of Commerce, for this award and recognition. It means so much to have the work of really all the nurses in the district and across the Northland recognized in the work that we do with our students, and we're just so grateful for the opportunity to work with our community and our students in this way. So thank you very much.
Congratulations to our Honoring Excellence recipients this month, and thanks to each of you for helping make LPS the best. So let's give those guys a big round of applause. Before I turn it back over to Mr. Bartlow, I did want to make mention that Carson Milbrandt, whose mom happens to teach at Shoal Creek Elementary, a little added caveat, but Carson is approaching 95 mile an hour on the radar gun as a pitcher, and we kind of brainstormed the idea of having the board members and maybe cabinet attempt to hit him in a batting cage. So I don't know if that's something worth considering. And also, I know, Mr. Barlow, you may be interested as maybe possibly one of the finalists. He has a whole lot of great programs. Looking at him right now, the Vanderbilt Commodores would be on that list. So with that, Honoring Excellence is complete for this evening.
Thank you, Dallas. It's great for both of those honorees. You know, with our state champions, we have a tradition here where we give a standing ovation, and certainly the Liberty Blue Jay baseball team. So let's do that. We're moving into public comment. I want to make sure I've got a handful of blue cards here. If you are wanting to do public comment and get in another blue card, please feel free to do that. In the meantime, as we get ready, I will make a reminder here, as we do every time. People addressing the board through public comment are going to be asked not to repeat necessarily what someone has said before. Persons wishing to address any subject concerning Liberty Public Schools and/or education may do so at the podium. Persons addressing the board are asked to keep the remarks concise and to the point. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. A person or persons may speak only once at the meeting, and concerns brought forward during public comment may be addressed by the superintendent or appropriate staff members, usually within a week. As a reminder, the board will not address any concerns brought forward during public comment, but again, work through the administration to appropriately respond to patron questions. So I'm going to go in the order that I have the cards, and A.J. Orby first to talk about leadership.
I want to thank you this evening for the opportunity to speak to you. I started high school during the time when desegregation started, so I've had a long time in history around school. And I am grateful because all of them had boards that had their day of being in charge of a lot of responsibility of children's education. Not only my education, but my 2 children and now grandchildren going through the school system. So I've got a lot of appreciation for what you're doing. I also have the history of, with the desegregation, of doing it peacefully. There was no problems. We did it. We were taught to respect each other, and I don't remember a single problem. It was a little difficult because it was strange, but strange is always new with something new. I guess I have one concern as I have read this new curriculum, critical race theory, is why is it so important? Thank you.
Ms. Orby?
We don't have.
No, I don't.
Megan Sims, again on the agenda topic of leadership.
Thank you for this opportunity. We just adopted Juneteenth as a federal holiday to acknowledge the ending slavery due to Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. January 17th, we celebrate MLK Jr. Day for his work on racial equality and ending racial segregation in the U.S. by non-violent civil disobedience. I pulled some quotes from his famous I Have a Dream speech. Now it's time to make justice a reality for all God's creation. I have a dream. The sons of former slaves and the sons of former slaves owners' sons will be able to sit down together at a table of brotherhood. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. Didn't we stand for equality, not equity? Merriam-Webster defines character as the group of qualities that make a person, group, or a thing from others. It defines equality as the quality or state of being equal. Equal is defined at the same measure, quantity, amount, or number as another. Kamala Harris likes to say that equality and equity are the same, but Merriam-Webster differs. It says proportional representation by race, gender, or class in those same opportunities. Harris says to achieve means unequal distribution of resources. So in essence, equity is only needs-based, meaning it's on personal circumstances and needs only. Isn't that counterintuitive to what MLK Jr. was saying? I graduated from Liberty High School in 2004, and I've been a resident of Liberty since I was born. The lies I have witnessed by some of the very school board members in this room makes me sick. For some of you to sit back and tell me that you do not have critical race theory and have no idea that it was being implemented into the schools is a bold-faced lie. In March of this year, you had LPS Chief Equity Officer Dr. Dixon C. Horn of beloved community come talk to you after she conducted an audit with 90 of LPS students with what she said, we need to do better in DEI. She, and I quoted, there were lots of discussions where we stopped and had long conversations and finally said folks, we need to reach a consensus, yes or no. So shared voice of power is currently being stripped from our kids. Every question that you asked on March 23rd said that you were all in knowing it was happening. So how dare you tell us that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a part of this district? An equity-centered strategic plan with your district is already occurring. Online resources were initiated January 1st and finalized February 28th. She said she was finalizing plans with you. I'm appalled by this keeping from parents in the dark of what's going on. Parents, you need to make yourself aware of what's happening in this district. The training the teachers are having right now involving teaching your children is wrong. Teachers, see that for yourself. The start of America wasn't July 4th, 1776. No, it was 1619 when slaves from Africa were brought from other African slave owners and brought to Virginia. 4 states have completely banned critical race theory. Florida, Arkansas, Arizona, and Oklahoma. 11 states, including Missouri, are considering it. Poverty, as we know it, are taught to be, is always going to exist. It's the very reason that we are taught to be generous towards our neighbors. CRT is not going to be any kind of solution, and it's going to go completely against that. By adopting DEI, what you are teaching our children to judge other kids by the content of their skin and not their character. And CRT and DEI are not the answer. There is no answer, and you're running a very thin fault line when it becomes catastrophic if you do not do what's best for our children and refuse to adopt this theory and this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sims. Ms. Tanya Johnson on leadership.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm going to start out by telling you that I feel like everything has come against me trying to come to be here tonight. I literally just got out of the hospital about 3 hours ago. I went to my computer to pull up my little speech, and it's gone. I have no idea why, but that's okay, so I'm going to speak from the heart, okay? So I'm going to go with this. I don't know how I happened upon watching the school board meeting in March. I think it was because the parents were wanting to talk about having to wear masks and that sort of thing, and that's not what I'm here to talk about. But I did happen upon the February-March school board meeting, and I listened to them, and I listened to for critical race theory to come up, or DEI. It never did, but the beloved community came up.
several times. So I did my research. I started looking into the beloved community, and that is when I became almost sick to my stomach. And I'm sure that there's some good things in here, but I scrolled all the way down to the beloved community, and what was in the beloved community was Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter has $2 billion in damages around our country. Are we going to be associated with that, really, guys? Also in beloved community, it talks about your whiteness, your white fragility, how not to be white. This is what came up to me, is this. We have families in this district, one that happens to live behind me, who has a black parent and a white parent. When we are teaching kids critical race theory, we are teaching that one is an oppressor and one is oppressed. The white child is the oppressor and the black child is oppressed. Who is that parent, that child supposed to identify with which parent? That is going to cause division. This is going to cause division in our community. We are going to start doing special things for different people. It is going to cause division amongst kids. Another example that I came up with were those parents. I mean, this is as ridiculous as saying that one of our Japanese students is responsible for Pearl Harbor. Come on. We know that racism does exist, but do we have to come into our schools and teach our kids that you are oppressed and you are oppressed? I would never tell a little black child that they are oppressed for any reason, because they can do anything they set their mind to do. And I think Liberty Public Schools does a good job of teaching that. But I went on and looked into the beloved community. It's very disturbing to me when you see things like the books. And by the way, I did read White Fragility. I'm going to tell you that now. I barely got through it. Trying to make me feel guilty for the color of my skin. And I have grandchildren who are going to be in this school district, and I'll be darned if they are going to be taught that they are oppressors to their best friend who lives next door who is black. Next thing I want to show you is on that particular page, I can just go through here, and it talks about in some of their trainings that you need to interrogate white folks. Is that really what we're going to do? I guess my question to you guys is, what part of the beloved community are we adopting? What are we going to be teaching our children? And I'm going to end with this one, because this is right here on here. You, white person, don't have to feel bad about your racist thoughts, actions, and beliefs, because science says that you're better. Drink this in. I believe this is fact-based. The Beast also says we're living in a post-racial society. Just be kind. Colorblindness is the way to go. But deep down, remember that you, white person, are superior. This is what is on this website that we have adopted.
That's going to be time, Ms. Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'll probably see you next month. Thank you.
All right, moving into consent agenda items 4.01 through 4.07. Our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure, Robert's rules, provide for a consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Documentation concerning these items has been provided to all board members and the public in advance to assure an extensive and thorough review. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member. Do I have a motion to approve consent agenda items?
I move the board approve consent agenda items 4.01 to 4.07.
Second.
Sandra?
Scott?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, moving into reports from the administration, starting with 5.01, Innovation and Learning Report.
We'll have Dr. Westphal come and report on that department's behalf, so we'll turn it over to Dr. Westphal.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. On behalf of Innovation and Learning tonight, I just wanted to call your attention to our program evaluations this month, including our early childhood and preschool report, as well as our special education reports. These have all been completed in our new annual report formatting, so I hope you enjoyed reading it that way. Thanks to Drs. Burke, Martin, Cook, and Meisenheimer for their work on their departmental reports and for sharing their updates for publication. Second, we have two strategic plan updates that we'd like to share with you this evening. One, Plan 17, which was to establish the professional learning communities through the embedded collaboration time in all grade levels. So we have finally closed the loop on that one, and last week Dr. Moore met with all the building leaders to review the expectations for the early release time next year every Wednesday afternoon. We set district-wide expectations that were developed by the team and then shared and presented all the information that the building principals will use in their staff retreats when they return in the fall. It is about the rationale of the time and how they will use it and how it will be organized, and then we want to make sure that all staff are engaged in that time. So that is Plan 17. Then we also have an update on Plan 5, which we will be wrapping up tomorrow, which is the last day of summer school. So we're redesigning summer school this year, and one of the facets that I wanted to draw out was that we are going to look at a middle school 1-week camp that we're calling LPS Biz Camp. And the camp is going to be run by high school students, and we're paying them as a part of the process. They're learning how to manage other students, and it's for middle schoolers. And so they will be working with businesses downtown on the square and doing projects and or performing tasks for the business to learn entrepreneurial skills. So a huge shout out, of course, to Colleen Jones and Tim Anderson for taking care of that and redesigning thought of summer school. And then last but not least, we wanted to share that we will be renewing our partnership with Project Lead the Way for our elementary science curriculum for next year. The grade level teams start work on July 9th through the 23rd. Just redesigning, we really liked what Project Lead the Way offered us, but we felt like it was more of a seed opportunity, and we really wanted to grow and expand on that using inquiry study. So we'll be working with the teams who will then present the lessons one time per month during their ELA block, because we're going to work on integrating content and trying to really work through that PBL process. So we'll have enhanced and customized teacher opportunities, but at the very least we can just deliver out the Project Lead the Way modules as we buy them. So anyway, that's all we have for tonight.
Any questions for Dr. Westfall or Dr. Moore while we have them?
I have some questions. Dr. Westfall, thank you for your report. How much time did you spend in the last month incorporating critical race theory into the curriculum?
None.
None?
No.
Okay. You talk about, or in the report, there's also a section on library media services, and we're looking at diversity in our library collection. So if you had a child who wore an eye patch, and we wanted to make sure that there were books in our libraries that represented children with eye patches or other kinds of disabilities, would that be an example of diversity and inclusion?
Yes.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Other questions of Dr. Westfall or Dr. Moore? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Westfall. 5.02 then is our equity report, and so we will welcome Dr. Dixon Seahorn to the podium.
Good evening. Good to be with you on this evening to share with you the report for the Office of Equity. In our report, we did share 4 updates. I do want to highlight one in particular, and that is in reference to Strategic Plan number 22, and it's in reference to our RFP Planning Committee. We convened a second semester, and we will be bringing forward to you a recommendation for a DEI PE service provider. And so later on in our board meeting, Dr. Westfall and I will be engaging in a joint effort in that presentation. So just wanted to make you aware of that. Other than that, I think the other thing I wanted to highlight this evening is with respect to strategic plan number 4, that is about equitable access and opportunity. And that is about really our equity action planning that we have been engaged in all of second semester in our schools, at the director level, and basically across our entire system. We are now at this point engaging in end-of-year reflection sessions, and just the work that has been done this year has been very, very, very impressive, and the reflections equally so. So those will wrap up here in the next couple of weeks, and then I'll be able to share with you kind of some next steps that are being discussed as a part of that work. So that's what I wanted to highlight this evening, and I'll entertain any questions or other comments you have for me.
Questions of Dr. Dixon Seahorn?
I have a question. So, Dr. Dixon-Seymour, could you just define for me how we are applying the word inclusion to the work that you're doing?
So I want to share with you the larger mission that we have around diversity, equity, inclusion. And in that mission, it was developed by our DLT Equity Work Group, which was established back in 2017. And as a result of that work, the committee landed on some terminology that we thought would give everyone a basic understanding of what we mean when we say. And so inclusion is one of those terms. There are actually three: diversity, equity, inclusion. So I'm going to share very quickly. Diversity is about, for LPS, valuing the cultural identities, experiences, and differences among our students and families and staff. Secondly, equity is about providing access to the abundant educational opportunities that promote successful outcomes for all students. And then last but not least, inclusion. Inclusion is about building a learning culture where the diverse perspectives of all within our larger community are recognized. So very simply, that is what our work is about.
And is that specifically applied to race only?
No, it is not.
Disability?
It includes disability, it includes race, it includes all aspects and facets of diversity. When we talk about who's included and whose voice is heard as they come to the table.
Okay. Thank you.
The other piece that I would add to that, Ms. Graham, is that a lot of those resources are housed on our website and are accessible to the community. As you all recall, walking through that strategic planning process, one of the questions that we landed on was what does it mean to thrive, right? Underscore all students. And so there are a lot of facets to this work, but it's not exclusionary. It's not exclusionary in that it truly is tailoring our approach in learning design to nearly 13,000 students. And those individual needs, call it personalization, call it learner-centered, call it equity, that's the work that we're working toward. So I can say on behalf of our entire team, there's not a person in our administration that isn't doing this work from the heart, with the understanding that there are a lot of different perspectives in our community, as well as a lot of different perspectives in our administration and our teaching staff and personnel.
And a lot of different kinds of kids.
Absolutely. And so how do we move it forward? And I appreciate Dr. Dixon-Seymour for standing in the gap in an effort to try to do this and do it well. Other questions of Dr. Dixon-Seymour?
One of the other questions I have on this topic is around beloved community, because I, too, have major concerns about that particular organization.
Sure.
It's my understanding that our staff was made available, or we gave them the ability to go through a couple of beloved community type facilitated events or classes through the Kaufman Foundation. And the Kaufman Foundation hired beloved community. And in our recent DEI work, we actually did not even allow them to bid, or
I can add some context and clarity to that. We were approached by the Kaufman Foundation to participate in the first of several cohorts across the Kansas City area, and it's really the bi-state area, so it's Missouri and Kansas. And there are public school districts involved. There are also some charter school districts involved. And the title that Kaufman has provided is it's an Equity in Schools cohort. And a small group of us have been participating in those conversations. It includes some administration from the central office level, from the building level. Yes. We have board representation and Kimmery Graham being part of that conversation, some community representation, but it's a small group. There's about 7 or 8 of us, I believe.
Absolutely.
And so as the facilitator, Beloved Community, they have come in and they have facilitated, so far we're at the midway point, yes, 4, I think, of 8 conversations. We've not expended any resources, any taxpayer dollars on this work. And as you know, our culture, we are not necessarily one to subscribe to one particular way of doing things. Instead, we subscribe to a success models approach, where we take the best of a variety of approaches and then really tailor it to our local needs. That's why we're in favor of local control as it relates to representing our context, our community, our student composition, and so forth. With all of that said, fast forward to our presentation a little bit later on the regular session agenda as it relates to a trainer or provider for staff training, they are not among the proposals that we have received. And just as we talk about any particular professional development provider or anyone that we do work with, be it our architect or be it our bankers, be it our lawyers or anything like that, as you think about everyone that's out there in each of those spaces, or even in the DEI space, there are things that we like about some, there are things that we don't like about others. But at the end of the day, we have to look at something that best fits our context in support of our strategy and the way that we're moving forward. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that, Dr. Dixon C. Warren, specifically around Kaufman and beloved community.
I really think you said it very succinctly in that we were approached by the Kaufman Foundation. As a matter of fact, I recall the time. It was after Dr. Tucker and I participated in a symposium that was hosted by the Suburban Balance, which caters to families in suburban communities to just give them a voice. And so after our participation on that, we were contacted by the Kaufman and asked if we would be interested in the Excellent Schools cohort. And they also shared with us, as Dr. Tucker mentioned, that it was a by-state approach. So there are the Kansas and Missouri school districts, and there's been a lot of learning for us. And again, there are some things that we say, not quite sure about that. There are other things, we've embraced it wholeheartedly. So again, it's not been at any cost to us. And it has been primarily at the district leadership level. This has not involved teachers at all. So I wanted to provide that clarification.
And from a time, energy standpoint, the majority of time that we've expended has been in two categories. One, as a small team being able to self-reflect with Kim Marie and others that are on that group from Liberty Public Schools. The other piece is really our ability to connect with other districts, from Shawnee Mission to Lee Summit to others that are included in that work, in and around what they're doing, lessons learned, how they're navigating this work in an effort to move opportunities and access for students forward. So I don't know if that answers your question. That's kind of a long, drawn-out explanation, but I didn't know if that generated more questions from you, Scott.
No, I think the point I'm trying to get to is we're conflating at times DEI and CRT. And I understand the concern about those lines, but there is a line there. CRT, we're not doing anything with CRT in Liberty. And the beloved community is not being contracted in Liberty for anything. We're participating through the Kaufman Foundation. The Kaufman Foundation downtown hired them for this one set of meetings.
Right. And I think that's the broader dialogue happening nationally, is the question in and around CRT, and is it equal to the same diversity, equity, and inclusion work, right? And kind of the parallels. And there's differing perspectives on that, certainly. I think the question at the end of the day is, when you look at our 13,000 students, are they afforded the same opportunities? More importantly, whether you think of our special needs students or our gifted students, students with dyslexia, students that are visually impaired, hard of hearing and so forth, we customize our approaches. We tailor our experience to those learners. So then when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's really on a couple of levels, and this is reflected in our strategic plan. It's in the staff that we have interacting and engaging with our students, and a diverse applicant pool, and trying to diversify that and hire the best people that we can get in our system. We've always been committed to that. The second piece to it is really in and around access and opportunity. And as you use yourselves as examples, what does AJ need? What does Scott need? What does Kim Marie need? What does Angie need? What does Nick need? What does Jeremy need? What does Drew need or Andy need, along with everyone in this room? And the answer is not sameness. The answer is customizing the experience and creating that opportunity to personalize the experience. That is a hard, significant lift, but that's the work that we're talking about, to get to that question of what does it mean to thrive. Because my hope is that we can all as a community rally around that, because we each have kids of our own or grandkids of our own that need different things. And that's really kind of what we're working toward. And we certainly know we have a lot of conversations and dialogue to have, but it's the right work on behalf of, again, all 13,000 of our kiddos in early child through high school.
So, and I'll tell you that in the last session that I was in, each session has a theme, and the last one was about student voice. And how do we incorporate methods and research-based approaches to increasing student voice? And later we'll talk about community engagement and how do we incorporate proven strategies for increasing community engagement. And all of those things help with, all of those things feed into inclusion.
And the other clarifying thing, and to speak to it because it's been brought up this evening and it's been brought up nationally, is that's the systems of oppression or the oppressed versus the victim or the oppressor. None of that has come up in our conversations with beloved community. And at the same time, I would have concerns in us shaming one segment of our student population over another, regardless of which direction that is going. That is not the business of education and care for kids. And so that's something that we want to be mindful of, and that there's that, what fits for every student's needs, but it's the same premise of how do we serve a diverse community and ensure that they are equipped and positioned to be able to thrive regardless of what pursuits they want to pursue, whether it's college, career, the workplace, post-high school.
Okay, so in Liberty, it's not CRT, in Liberty, it's not beloved community. But as we move forward, there are concerns out there about federal dollars being tied to this, et cetera, and those are things that we will deal with as they come down the road.
Absolutely.
But as of now, this is where we are.
And we are doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work as reflected in our website, our publications, our strategic plan, our vivid vision, our graduate profile, all of those of which are available online. So.
And all of which had significant community input.
That's correct. Other questions of Dr. Dixon Seahorn? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Dixon Seahorn.
Yes, thank you. Moving to 5.03, the finance report.
We will hear significantly from Ms. Sullivan a little bit later on in the agenda, but also wanted to provide opportunity for her to give an update to her report submitted this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker. I'll be brief. I have one donation to recognize for you tonight, a monetary donation of $598 from Liberty Rotary to the Library Media Department. This donation will be used to provide 2 iPads for use with the STEAM Bus Osmos hardware. We thank the Liberty Rotary for that generous donation and support of our STEAM Bus. I also just wanted to update you that Business Services Department has been busy closing out the year, which ends tomorrow, and beginning the new year, and rolling the budgets and preparing for that transition, as well as the final preview of the budget document, which we will talk about more later, as Dr. Tucker indicated. I also wanted to share with you that the Audit and Finance Committee did meet last night and reviewed the financial statements and the proposed budget. They did not have any concerns to pass on to you. I also wanted to recognize the 3 AFC members whose terms are expiring. They're Sari Cantrell, Allison Gardner, and Ryan Joy. We are very appreciative of their service to you and to the staff, students, and community of Liberty, and thank them for their service. And that's what I have for you tonight.
Questions of Cindy, knowing that you'll see her again later on? Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan.
5.04 operations report.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Just a few items to report on tonight, in addition to what's been uploaded on the 2 reports under board docs. First of all, just the 5-day meal program is in effect and will be through the course of the summer. That's taking place at Liberty High School. So any information you might want on that, you can look at the district's website. Also, Kids Zone Summer Camp is getting ready to start up with summer school ending. We roll right into Kids Zone Camp through the month of July. We have 273 students that are signed up, taking place at Brookview. So excited to do that this year. Of course, last year we weren't able to. Also wanted to let you know that our legal services RFP has been released, and we're in the process of kind of moving that forward with a target date of August for first read to the board, and September would be the second read for that item. So just want to make sure you were aware that that was moving through the system. And then 3 other bigger projects that are kind of in process right now. One, our capital planning process. You see the report and board docs, just kind of an update on some of the major projects. You're seeing that underway in the community. And then also our facility master planning process is just really starting in earnest. I will report out in more detail in July some of that work that's kind of taking place now, especially at the building level. but we'll keep you posted throughout the balance of the fall as well. And then last, the return to learn and getting ready for fall. We have begun to meet again. We reconvened our group that was very involved for the past 16 months. And so we're getting ready for the fall and planning for several contingencies that we could be faced with as we hit the fall of next year. But again, we'll be prepared for whatever comes up. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Mr. Anderson, just regards to the staffing and transportation, I know we're having a little bit of a challenge there. Thoughts coming up on the new school year, feeling good about approaches that we're taking?
Yeah, I think it's not only transportation, it's several of the operations departments, and we've been in an ongoing and active conversation with HR and looking at each of those areas and how to approach them. Obviously, the hiring and retention is part of that, but we're also looking at salaries. That will take some time, but we are taking a more comprehensive look at all of operations.
And as I glanced down through here, it looks like all the capital projects are slated for finishing prior to school year beginning, some as late as mid-August, but still in time. Are there any on here that I'm missing?
All the big ones, the ones on that report,
right.
And of course a lot of the HVAC and roofing work that's not reported there. But yes, right now everything is tracking well, of course, weather dependent, but the big projects, the ones that are most...
The libraries, the parking lots.
Those are all in good shape as we see them here tonight.
Super excited to see those turf fields being placed.
Other questions for Mr. Anderson? Okay, thank you.
Moving into 5.05, Human Resources Report.
Dr. Vogler.
Thank you very much. We've uploaded the report at length for you, and I'll answer any questions you have regarding that, but I do want to draw out one element and give you an update. It's with regard to our certificated recruiting update. This is the season when we're in full force, making sure our classrooms are staffed for the fall. The report showed 59 vacancies. That's up to 61, so we've added a couple more requests to be released from contract. The good news is we've added 5 positions closer to closing the vacancies, so we're at 58 now that have been filled. There's 3 remaining positions that we're working to fill for the fall. And that is the main focus, obviously, of the partnership that Human Resources has with our building principals and department leads throughout the summer. There's other items in the report, but just for the sake of time, I'll field any questions you have on any of that.
Only 3 openings seems to be pretty good at this point.
Really good.
Yeah.
We typically see about 90% of our certificated positions filled before the school year ends, and that's where we were. So we did add some requests to be released, and that happens too. Life happens, spousal transfers, et cetera, that may cause the need for employees to be released from their contract. That'll fluctuate that number a little bit, but by and large, the needle is typically around 90% filled by the time the school year ends. With 3 remaining positions, we're well close to closing that at the end of June. So very, very typical.
Good.
Anything else? Thank you, Dr. Vogler.
And final from reports from the administration, 5.06, Superintendent's Report.
Just a couple of additions to highlight from my report this evening. I want to thank all of our students, staff, and families who participated in one way or another during summer school. If you'll recall, this time last year, one of our return to learn plans was how do we bring students back in a summer school environment, and successfully navigated that. Nearly a year later, we had over 5,200 students participate in summer school, elementary, middle, and high school, and that included both face-to-face as well as virtual options. So again, kudos to everyone for their help in participating and making that a success. Switching midstream as it relates to health department guidance and announcements that came out back on June 14th. So we were able to navigate that successfully. And looking ahead, obviously we're working toward preparations for the start of the school year in August with additional return to learn plan work, as Mr. Anderson mentioned. One thing we're waiting and anticipating is what additional guidance comes from a variety of our partners, looking from the CDC level to Clay County Public Health Center, to groups like Children's Mercy Hospital, Liberty Hospital, the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We don't make those decisions in a vacuum. but instead seek out the best information to, again, plan for what works for Liberty Public Schools. So what you can anticipate in August is 2 types of offerings. At the face-to-face level, pre-K through grades 12, 5 days a week is our aim, with the understanding that virtual works for some families or some students, whether it's a one-off course at the secondary level for a high school student, or whether it's that family who, say, is traveling, or whose students are engaged in high competitive arenas, be it athletics or be it fine arts, whatever the case may be, virtual works for them. And so we won't nearly see the 2,500 students that we saw this last year during the pandemic participate in virtual. It'll be several hundred, however. And so I appreciate Dr. Westphal and Dr. Moore and others working to be able to make that available over the course of the summer and then as the school year starts in August. We've talked quite a bit about the strategic plan this evening. One of the things that we were looking to do March of last year was to be able to push out our vivid vision, which is the narrative of our strategic plan in terms of telling the story of here's where we want to be, here's what we want to look like in subsequent years. As you'll recall, that strategic planning process, it involved several pieces. We wanted to create a strategic plan that was agile, or that was flexible, that we reviewed annually, that we celebrated our accomplishments, we carried certain topics and certain work forward that maybe wasn't completed the year prior, but then at the same time identified areas that we felt needed to be incorporated into our strategic plan. We look to continue to do that, and our leadership team is in the process of kind of resetting what we've done, what we've accomplished, but then also looking forward to be able to bring items to you to consider probably around the middle part of the fall. October, November has been our pattern, and so we'll look to continue to do that. Just to underscore it again, that information is available on our district's website for you to be able to access, whether it's an administrator, staff, student, or member of the community. A couple weekends ago, several of us attended the Missouri School Boards Association Igniting Great Ideas Conference. We had 3 of the 12 breakout sessions were represented by Liberty Public Schools. One on the topic of competency-based learning. If you're not familiar with competency-based learning, it's the ability to kind of lift the parameters as it relates to where students are at on 2 ends. One, being able to provide those additional supports that those students might need that are struggling to ensure that they master content. But then at the same time, how do we lift the lid, so to speak, for those students that are ready to move on? And sometimes our grade levels and Carnegie units and traditional approaches box students in. That's an example of personalization and being learner-centered and equity that we want to strive toward. In addition to that, we had a presentation by Liberty Academy on the Unschooled Challenge. I greatly appreciate Melissa Norris, Art Smith for being part of that conversation. Mrs. Reed helped facilitate that session. We had nearly 50 to 60 individuals in each of the sessions that we presented. The last session that was highlighted was on our Grow Your Own teacher efforts. Both with the scholarshiping program that we've adopted as a board over the course of the last several years. That was one component. Another component that fits within that Grow Your Own teacher space is our educator internship program that students participate in at both Liberty High School and Liberty North High School. The third category that may not be as well known is how we're able to work within our staff levels, particularly in our support staff areas, to encourage support staff that want to pursue a position as a certificated teacher. And how do we come around them, support them to get them into that teacher development effort or that pipeline, so to speak. So again, thank you to everyone that helped present and prepare. Dee Rosecrans was instrumental on the Grow Your Own Teacher side, so I appreciate him helping it out as well. Lastly, I want to recognize Mr. Bartlow, who was recognized at that conference as well for his completion of the master's level certification as it relates to required trainings from the Missouri School Boards Association. With that said, would certainly entertain any questions that you all may have of me this evening.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment, and I just wanted to acknowledge the tremendous effort of the communication group this past year and how that was illustrated in the evaluation. Wow.
Thank you for that.
Wow, they did a lot of work this year.
And you have that program evaluation that reflects a lot of lifting by a lot of different people, led by Mr. Dallas Ackerman, he would not be one to accept any type of accolades. But as you look through that program evaluation and you just look at the level of communication, and that's not just a testament to him, but that's truly a testament to everyone on our team in an effort to be customer-centered, student-centered, family-centered, and that if you had a question, you had a concern, our team would connect. And we remain committed to doing that regardless of what the concerns or challenges or suggestions that we might hear from our community. So, again, thank you, Dallas.
And I would also say to that point, the way you had to pivot to do the things that are done pre-COVID and COVID.
Yeah.
The way you would hand out awards and the way we recognize our individuals at the beginning of the board meeting. Very, very well done. So, very appreciated. It's very nice to have those pieces still in play, even if we don't get to see the people in person.
Sure. Yep. Okay.
That's great. Thank you all for the reports this evening and to your teams for helping to put those together. Those are incredibly helpful, as you know. Moving into unfinished business 6.01, board policy revisions. We only have one.
You do this evening. You have board policy GDN, which you saw previously. And so I appreciate you all reviewing that and always sending thoughts or questions along to us, but would send that to you this evening for your consideration, entitled Evaluation of Support Staff. Anything to add to that, Dr. Vogelar, as far as items to make note of?
Just that this is a byproduct of a modification of our summative evaluation tool that we're using. Streamlining it allows for more effective communication.
Any questions, comments?
No. And this is second read, so it's been out there for 30 days.
Yeah, that's correct.
I move the board adopt policy GDN on second read.
Second. Sandra?
Scott?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, moving into 6.02, the elementary fine arts curriculum.
This is another item that we've shared with you previously and that we will be bringing to you in several cycles, the elementary level and also the secondary level curriculum as it relates to fine arts. So Dr. Westfall, anything to add in this regard?
Just a reminder that this is the elementary section of it, and then we will be working on the 612. This is all in response to the new standards that were released by DESE during the pandemic, and so we are just catching up with that. But in addition, then we'll have our elementary science and social studies coming up in the next year, so we'll be ready to look at that.
Any questions, comments? I would entertain a motion.
I move the board adopt the elementary fine arts curriculum.
Second.
Sandra?
Scott?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Continuing to 6.03, the 21-22 district budget.
As Ms. Sullivan gets ready to share a little bit, I want to emphasize that as soon as the budget is approved, it's wrong. In the sense that it is a constantly evolving document, whether it's on the revenue side or the expenditures piece. But we start early in the spring in terms of planning for the following fiscal year. And so as we've kind of done our pattern over the course of the last several years, looking at our anticipated revenues in March, those expenditures in April, bringing a draft budget document to you in the month of May, looking at that opportunity to discuss further at our June board retreat, and then culminating in the final approval at our June meeting. And so that's been our pattern. We've been having these conversations for some time, obviously. Again, a unique piece specific to this time frame in which we live is as it relates to the pandemic and the ensuing ESSER or CARES Act funds, similar to what we experienced in the Great Recession from several years ago in the introduction of stimulus dollars. So that has created some new issues, concerns for us, but also opportunities as it relates to how those dollars are expended. So we'll turn it over to Cindy to provide us an update since the last time we met in May to discuss that preliminary draft document.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker. And yes, as we did begin this process in March, this is the culmination of many months of work by many people. Since the May meeting, when we presented to you the preliminary budget in full, we have spent time reviewing and updating the budget as we have received additional information. In the final document that is presented to you tonight, the 21-22 revenue budget remains the same as was presented to you in May. Nothing significant came to our attention while performing our review, and we didn't feel the need to make any changes to what we presented to you in May on revenue. Revenue budget amendments will be made as necessary in the fall after the tax rate hearing and as enrollment numbers become available, so you will see revenue changes at that point. During the review of the expenditure budgets, we did adjust several supply and purchase services budgets after looking at past expenditures. And we also ran across a couple of things that were budgeted in two places, so we were able to reduce. Different budget managers had both included several expenditures in the education side of things that crossed both worlds, so we were able to reduce budgets by that. In total, we were able to reduce the expenditure budget by $1.5 million, which is significant, but we felt like looking at history and based on what we know going forward, that those expenditures should have been reduced and were probably over budgeted in the past. So we feel very comfortable with making that reduction after a very thorough review of those expenditures. So you will note that change in the document tonight. Finally, in the document, the current year FY21 information was updated last week. So it is very close to the final numbers that you will see in the June financial statements that will be presented to you at the July board meeting. So those are all new figures as from the May document. But you are approving the FY22 numbers tonight. Lastly, I would like to thank Joe Maloney and Denise Aldrich for the tremendous amount of time and effort that they put into the preparation of this budget document, and the rest of the team back in the Business Services Department, and all district budget managers and their teams for the work that they put into developing the budgets. It truly is a many-month process, and we appreciate all the attention and detail that is paid to the process.
So maybe a little less than 1% reduction in expenditures. Revenue is about the same.
Correct.
Nothing materially different from the last time we dove into this.
Correct.
And fund balances.
Correct. We anticipate ending fund balances right at 28%, which is less than right at a 1% increase over this year for next year. 28% next year, 27% this year.
And does the infusion of federal dollars, additional federal dollars, impact that?
Yes, the additional monies are part of what was causing that fund balance to go up. But you'll recall, next year you will see that start to go down as we return to normal.
Those additional federal, that was the CARES money, is that correct?
Relief, COVID stimulus relief funds.
Yep, okay.
And we still continue to see that fund balance
Yes,
decrease
if
as
you
we
look at
project
the
out.
projection document,
Yep.
It will return to a much lower percentage as we go along.
As we go along.
Yeah.
And your Audit and Finance Committee met yesterday evening?
Mhm.
No concerns or questions
No.
from them as it
Right.
relates to fiscal year 22?
Nothing. They have walked the process with you. They have seen the preliminary revenue, expenditure, and total budget as you have had no concerns over how we're budgeting, what we're budgeting, and what they have seen.
You mentioned the tax rate earlier.
Correct.
Can you speak to the timeline as far as what we can anticipate setting the tax rate this year?
Once we receive final numbers from the county, we will be able to set a tax hearing rate. Because Clay County is now a charter county, we are not required to set the tax rate until September. It is required to be filed with the State Tax Commission October 1st. So everything is pushed back a month from what you're used to. In prior years, we had tax rate hearing in August. We are anticipating that it may be September this year before we have the tax rate hearing. Again, dependent upon when Clay County gets the final assessed valuation numbers to us.
And we still said basically our revenue is coming from state and local. 93% of all revenue comes from state and local funds, right?
That's correct.
Federal maintains just roughly 5%, but even that's inflated as a result of CARES Act, right?
The typical federal from title programs and special education is right around 3% normally without stimulus funds.
Yep. And to your point, the federal typically only comes in and funds special education, school lunch programs.
Title programs.
Title programs, that's it.
Yes.
Okay.
And to that end, something late that we received is tied to the special legislative session and the funding of Medicaid and so forth, and that the governor's office had released or announced the possibility of withholdings.
That's correct.
Of which at this point, that's not a concern for us moving forward into this next fiscal year.
That Medicaid tax was passed
Yeah.
early Saturday morning, I believe. We have not heard that the withholds have been reinstated, but it is anticipated that the withholding that Governor Parsons indicated could happen will be rescinded. He had indicated that he would withhold about $20 million of transportation funding to school districts if that Medicaid tax was not passed.
Okay.
So we are anticipating that we will see that released.
Other questions of Cindy? Again, thanks to the entire Business Services Department and Audit and Finance Committee, as well as every budget manager, whether it's on the operations side or on the academic side, for their efforts over the course of this year to get us to this point this evening.
I move the board adopt the 2021-2022 district budget.
Second.
Sandra?
Scott?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving into new business, we'll start with 7.01, Audit and Finance Committee appointments. As were posted on the original agenda, we did have the opportunity to interview two of the potential candidates. Sort of new. One has served previously, one is new to potentially serving in this capacity. The other is currently serving and looking to renew her time on this committee. Any conversation with regards to the candidates? I'll just say I was impressed with the two that we interviewed. I think they've got a great background, good opportunity to come in and help out, certainly in serving in this role. I know Ms. Gardner couldn't be with us this evening, but I do know that certainly Ms. Sullivan recommends that we maintain her on the committee, as she provides great insight and feedback, and certainly has been a good contributor throughout the process.
I would just add that I appreciate when people from the community step up to contribute to the success of the district. So my thanks to people who have applied.
So I would entertain a motion.
I move the board appoint Dennis Picard, Alan Bright to serve on the Audit and Finance Committee and to extend the term of Allison Gardner through 2024.
Second. Sandra?
Scott?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving into 7.02, the 21-22 Professional Development Plan.
This is an item that we bring to you annually. That is a byproduct of the work that our Professional Development Committee sets up for the coming school year. It's provided within statute as far as support of professional development for our teachers and staff. Dr. Westfall helps facilitate those conversations with our committee, so I appreciate her leadership there. Anything to add in respect to this item?
Yes, it is my honor to present the 21-22 District Professional Development Plan to you on behalf of the District Professional Development Committee. Just a reminder that the committee is the elected board of professional development for Liberty Public Schools, one person from every building, and then 3 leaders, Tara Harvey at the high school level, Carrie Gabriel at the middle level, and Ashley Duvall at the elementary level. They met in April to finalize and design this plan. As we return to normal, you'll see, again, an increase in the allocations for professional learning. One of the things that we will do is delay first semester on our subs because we just don't know what that looks like in the future. So we will see a little bit of a cautionary approach to our professional learning in the fall. But on top of that, our focus is on PBL and inquiry, visible learning, and then competency through PLCs. So that's the focus for next year, and we appreciate your approval.
Oh, Dr. Westphal, help me out. PLCs.
Professional learning communities.
Got it.
In-time professional learning for our staff amidst everything they navigated. So if you go back to this time last year, we were having a conversation about how do you build Liberty Virtual School over the course of the summer, let alone staff it, let alone teach people what it needs to look like, because it was going to look completely different than the fourth quarter. And so Dr. Westphal, Dr. Moore, others, along with our innovation and learning coaches, retooled, reset, and delivered professional learning even amidst a pandemic to get that up and running so that it was a completely different experience for those learners that opted for virtual as compared to what they experienced fourth quarter of last year. That may or may not seem like a tremendous endeavor, but it's an incredible endeavor if you stop and look at the amount of hours and time and energy and coming alongside staff to support them. So on behalf of everyone that was involved in that process, thank you to Dr. Westphal and Dr. Moore and others. Just felt the need to share and relay that.
Thank you. Dr. Tucker, I can add just some data to that point. When we tallied the number of hours of professional learning that we accomplished this year, typically in a year we do about 32,000 hours that we capture in MLP frontline. This year it was over 75,000 hours that our teachers contributed on their own time because we did not release until second semester for elementary. That was added in, and that was time that was all done virtually. So they spent all of this time on their own, really trying to figure out how to address learning for our kids during this really crazy year. So thank you for saying that.
And another challenge looking ahead will be how do we address where learners are at in the fall when they return. So play this out. You have 2,500 students over the course of this last year that were learning virtually. That number diminishes to a few hundred. There will be some students that step foot into a classroom in August that had not been in a face-to-face classroom environment since March of last year, many of which have excelled, some of which have struggled, and so how do we meet them where they are and really not miss a beat in picking up where they've left off or trying to get them to where they need to be. That's the work of the classroom teacher. That's the mastery in terms of what happens on instruction and learning on a daily basis. So the year ahead may be as much of a challenge academically in that regard. Some of the initiatives that we've talked about, be it project-based, be it competency-based, be it innovative assessment practices, allow us to tailor responses and systems of support for every single student accomplished in training up our teachers. So thanks to everyone.
Well, you mentioned academically, but even social emotionally, right?
Absolutely.
Making that move and that shift, so.
Yeah.
Great. Good. Any additional questions, conversation? I'll entertain a motion.
I move the board adopt the 2021-2022 professional development plan.
Second.
Sandra?
Scott?
Yes.
Kimberly?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie? Yes. Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving to 7.03, contracts, purchases, and bids.
We do have several contracts and purchases to be able to share with you this evening, the first of which is the Core Collaborative, which you have a description of in board docs. But we also wanted to spend some additional time just kind of reflecting on the process of soliciting responses to an RFP in support to our strategic plan work in and around training for support staff and certificated staff. It's been a very diligent process to get us to where we are this evening, even going back to the drawing board, but really focused on what we believe fits Liberty Public Schools and our community and the work that we're moving toward. So we wanted to spend some time and invite Dr. Westfall and Dr. Dixon Seahorn to report out on this piece.
This is the only piece in this category that is not the chair for first read, correct?
That's correct. The other pieces we'll speak to in just a moment as it relates to some emergency contracts.
Purchases.
Yes.
Two separate chunks.
That's correct.
All right, hello again. So Dr. Westfall and I are going to tag team on this brief presentation this evening to give you just an overview of the process that our RFP selection committee went through to bring to you the recommendation this evening for a PD service provider around diversity, equity, inclusion. So I want to make sure the clicker is working. It is. Wanted to open up with just the process that we followed because we felt that that was very important in terms of providing context here for this evening. So back in February, we reached out to some staff members and were able to form a committee of about 12 people to be a part of this very in-depth process. So the team included myself and Dr. Westfall representing cabinet. We also had 3 directors, and one of the things we really enjoyed about this process is that we had representation from the operations side of the organization, the academic side of the organization, and the human resources side in terms of director representation. We also had 3 school leaders, again representing elementary, middle, and high school. And then we had 4 representatives from the PDC committee, which Dr. Westfall just addressed here, our professional development committee. And we again ended up with representation from the elementary, middle, and high school level. So that was very important to us to have the representation as a cross-section of who's in the organization. And so after that, we established our focus. The focus was given to us by way of strategic plan number 22, which was about our coming together to walk through this process to select a PD service provider. And as we were thinking about our why, we landed on really 3 things that I want to share here with you very briefly. We wanted to ensure that the PD service provider could help us, along with engaging with our staff, develop a firm understanding of our LPS equity-centered vision, beliefs, and purpose in terms of taking that across the entire organization, to embed our collective why throughout the professional learning experience. So really, this is more than just training. This is a professional learning experience and opportunity for our staff in order to cultivate a sense of belonging, purpose, value, urgency within every staff member across the entire organization, and also to build capacity within our own staff to support the equity-centered strategic plan. So after we established our focus for our work, we then researched and developed the RFP. It was then formally announced on April 1st with a deadline of April the 16th. As a result, we received a number of bids. I will share that with you here in just a moment. We then reviewed and evaluated and even ranked each of the bids that were submitted by the firms. We then scheduled virtual interviews with 5 firms. 4 actually showed up. We had 1 that decided not to participate in the process. We also then discussed the pros and cons after each one of those interviews. They were all held virtually, so we basically had a debrief session, the pros and cons of our interviews with those prospective PD service providers. And then after much deliberation, much discussion, reference checks, all of that goes into the process. We then selected the firm that we believe will provide services to best meet our professional learning needs. So these are the names of the PD service providers. There were 10, and their bids ranged as low as $20,000 and as much as $155,000. And so from this point, Dr. Westphal is going to share with you who we landed on in terms of our recommendation to you and any additional information you may need. And again, this is for first read on this evening.
So as Dr. Seymour said, we looked through all the different organizations, and one of the best fits that what we recognized was the work that we had done in the winter of this last year with our book study, and the team from the Core Collaborative was the recommendation that we would like to bring forward to you tonight. The scope of the work is really about what we realized was we really wanted to work on what it meant to belong in this community, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't distracted by the ideas of dividing things, that we really wanted to make sure that our children in our district that we serve understood that they belonged. And so this seemed to be the right fit, and we really were looking to make sure that that is exactly where our focus was, and so that was why this one rose to the top. The cost of it, actually, one of the things when I got into the work is helping to design it. They actually offered us quite a bit more, but we scaled this down because we recognized that we wanted to take our time in moving this forward and making sure that we bring not only our board along with it, because we'll be extending our book study with the authors, but that we worked with our parents and with our leadership to understand where we're going with this work, and that didn't feel like we were trying to push forward too fast or do something that was not a part of what we were all going to do together. So there's just some details on the cost, and we did add an additional opportunity for the buildings to buy the text that we were going to study so that they could look at them as well. So that was a part of the total contract cost, as you can see there. The other thing we wanted to do was explain the way that we designed it, and so part of the work that I contribute to is to make sure that all of our professional development fits together. And so as we settled into the process, we had 3 tiers. Those tiers included a keynote to the entire district at the beginning of the year. So very often we do this work. We had Sarah Martin from New Zealand a couple of years ago. Last year we did not have one because of the pandemic. So this year we are having the authors, Sean Crownapple and Boyd Cobb. Actually, I think it would just be Mr. Crownapple this time because Mr. Cobb works for the Department of Education in Colorado, and he is already booked that day, so we will just have Mr. Crownapple. But they will just do an over session for the entire district virtually, and we won't be gathering together yet. It's not really quite time. Tier 2 then is to work with our district leadership team. We're going to have 4 sessions spread out working through the book, just like what we did together. And in addition to that, we will have 4 sessions with our principals so we can get them starting to reflect on the work. And then we're going to have 1 session, a similar amount of time, with our middle level leadership. And so we wanted to make sure that we included our managers and our coordinators in that kind of work. And they typically don't end up sitting in the room with us with our principals. So we wanted to make sure that opportunity is available.
Excuse me. Explain what you consider middle.
So our
middle level leadership.
SLPs, coordinators, let's see, who else was that? The supervisors for operations.
Okay.
Right. So we were just trying to do a roundabout, making sure that we included operations.
Makes total sense. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then the last thing is we're going to start, based on the data that we took way back when we started looking at our equity-centered strategic plan, was from the data that we took from our stakeholders, where they said they really wanted us to start looking at personalized learning for our children and including them. And a really big focus was on those special areas like special education and gifted. And so we wanted to make sure that our buildings understood how those students needed to be included in the work that we're doing in the classrooms and what we can do about that. So they will be attending to the secondary buildings to start, with meetings in the second semester once we all understand. Part of the work that I spent some time with the authors on is understanding that they're going to meet us where we are. So when it comes to looking at it, they are not necessarily looking at any specific story to tell us, but they're really trying to help us get to where we want to get, which is what Dr. Tucker really shared so especially, is making sure that all of our students are getting the personalized and customized learning that we intend for them to have. So that's really our work on this. And do I have one more? Oh, so this is the text that we'll be looking at, and those are the groups that they had worked on with before. That is one of the pieces of research that Dr. Seahorn did, was she called them to see what it is. So we wanted to make sure that while we were doing this work, that there wasn't anything underneath that we didn't agree with. As you said, we really do bring some of the best things together from all the organizations, and that's the same in this case. Thank you.
What do you think would be, what's only one of the takeaways from this? What do you expect our professionals to have as they leave this training? What would they have?
You know, I think, AJ, really one of the things that's really hard to believe, because we do end up landing this in a lot of titles. And I really think that's unfortunate, because one of the areas that in Liberty Public Schools that we really want to talk about is how to include, for example, our special education students in our regular ed classes. That's just been a focus area that we've had for a long time. It doesn't really rise to the surface when we start talking about the different organizations that we look at that, and we get distracted from that, and that's unfortunate. Because really we want to make sure that we're personalizing learning, and the rest of that is really not our story here. I know it's hard to believe, considering a lot of things that are happening today, but I promise you that we really are trying to look at inclusion when it comes to children, and not color or, I don't know, poverty. I think it's just everybody. And I know that's really hard to understand sometimes, but that is really what we're trying to do.
The other piece similar to that is, if you think about an individualized education plan like we've had for our special ed students for a long time, right, since IDEA was enacted, invert that in terms of thinking about what might it look like to have an individual plan for every single learner. State of Missouri is moving in that direction as far as an ICAP. We've made some changes from a policy level as it relates to a tiered diploma and real-world learning and market value assets. And so if you take that customization and individualization like we've seen throughout the years with a special needs student, and apply that to every single student in terms of preparing them for what they're going to experience beyond high school, that's that individualized tailoring that we've talked about quite a bit this evening. Which centers in and around this notion of belonging and our shared humanity, right, and that dignity piece. Not to speak for the board, but as we walked through this book, we took a pretty deep dive, and I think it echoed with where we're heading within our strategic plan and getting toward that term thrive for every single one of our students. The other thing I would add, in that the ladies missed this piece, we hit the pause button earlier in the spring semester as we were walking through this process, because we weren't quite satisfied in how this would apply within our community, within our context, really from a process standpoint. But nonetheless, we clarified some questions, we customized things to meet our needs, thus the recommendation for first read to you this evening. So,
and Mr. Bird, to answer your question, one more thing, I think if I was going to say what the outcome was, it's really improved relationships. Dr. Tucker had vision priorities for us 7 years ago that still stand today. Personalized learning, learner agency, informed decision making, and and number one is relationships. And we know we have a long way to go with that, but that is always and will continue to be our focus.
So I just have one comment on this, and that's having walked through the book and having a pretty deep understanding of what belongingness means, I was really pleased to see us land on this one. Not all kids feel like they belong at school, and it's time for us to fix that, including my own. So it's time for us to ensure that all kids feel like this is their community and their home.
And I'd just add one comment. I mean, I'd encourage anybody that has questions about this book to pick it up and read it. We sat down and read it as a board. I read a little bit of it before I joined the board, but finished up with the group. I've got a kiddo with special needs, and when I think about inclusion through my own lens and through my own family, it's about how my child feels going to school, whether they're happy to be at school, whether they feel included. And so if there's anybody that has questions about this book, I would strongly encourage them to take a look at it and read it.
We also have a previous experience working with Core Collaborative. Can you speak to that as far as topics we've worked with them on and how that experience has been?
Yes,
Well, part of the core collaborative was the work on what we called initially data teams. So really trying to measure the impact of our programming on student achievement. We moved from that to visible learning, which you have been hearing about for years. We're still in that work. It's a part of taking our curriculum. As you know, our curriculum is posted on our website. It is frontward facing, so we have always published our curriculum for everyone to see. But we work through that, identifying what we call learning intentions and success criteria in order to achieve what we are calling learner agency, so the ability for children to really know what they're intending to learn and then be able to have a pathway to get through that. So we've worked through traditional learning for a very long time, quite successfully in Liberty actually, but really trying to bring up our game and make sure that our children are owning what it is and what they want to do and how they achieve what they want when they finish with us, is what Dr. Tucker calls Thrive. And so we just really are trying to figure that out. And I can give you a very long explanation about how our curriculum for ages has really been very segmented. And we're trying to create pathways for kids so that when they get through, they feel like they've learned something that's really important to them and not just important for us to check a box. So that's really our goal. And we can lead some kids along the way if someone do that.
Other questions of Dr. Dixon-Seaborn or Dr. Westfall? Again, presented to you this evening for first read. So let us know if you have thoughts, questions, comments on that as it relates to the proposal this evening. So thank you, ladies. Appreciate it very much. We do have a second set of items that we wanted to turn over to Mr. Anderson to walk us through as it relates to additional purchases and bids, contracts.
Yes, these items are all up for consideration tonight under first read, all falling under policy DJF-1 as emergency or expedited purchases. All these should look a little familiar to you as we put them in a Friday update so that you have some knowledge of them beforehand. I'll clip through these fairly quickly. The top bundle of these are pretty minor contracts related to professional services. One is with Avant Acoustics regarding consulting services, acoustical consulting services. Another is with Integrated Vision Solutions, which is for orientation and mobility services. The next is with the Family Conservancy, which is for social and emotional learning services at the Early Childhood Center. And then agreement with T-Mobile to provide free Wi-Fi hotspots for eligible students. So those are all items that require an agreement or a contract. And then in addition to that, there are 4 other items that were emergency repairs. And again, I'll walk through these very quickly. One was the Fieldhouse elevator at Liberty North, required immediate repair. Walk-in freezer at Liberty High School needed the evaporator replaced. We did move ahead with 2 temporary classrooms, modular classrooms within the existing footprint of Shoal Creek to get that moving so we could have that in place prior to the start of the school year in August. And then last, P1 group, we had within this building with our data center, we've been struggling with some cooling issues and had to call in for some repairs for that work as well. So again, all up for consideration tonight, and would take any questions.
The modular units, Mr. Anderson, those are the ones that we've installed previously over at Shoal Creek, right? Very similar.
Yeah, but we have actually within Shoal Creek, there are 2 of those in place already.
Okay.
Years ago.
Okay. Any other questions with regards to those emergency purchases?
I move the board approve the emergency purchases from Avant Acoustics LLC, Integrated Vision Solutions LLC, the Family Conservancy, T-Mobile, TK Elevator, Tempcon LLC, Scott Rice Office Works, and P1 Group, Inc.
Second. Sandra?
Scott?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving into the last item in new business, 7.04, the 21-22 meal prices.
So this is an item that we annually bring before you as well, and you have a graphic reflecting the last several years, about 5 years worth of information, including the proposed recommendations for 2021-2022 as it relates to meal prices. What you'll notice in that comparison between the last school year and this coming school year is no changes as it relates to those price recommendations, cost of meals. I will add something unique that happened in terms of at the federal level. From the Family First Corona Response Act, the United States Department of Agriculture extended access to meals beyond just from those that qualify as far as free and reduced lunch. With that said, it's extended through the entirety of the 2021-22 school year. I don't know if that is a new normal moving forward, but what a tremendous blessing, for lack of a better word, to all of our students and all of our families. I would also accentuate the work that Nutrition Services did throughout the pandemic in ensuring that meals are provided for those virtual students, or when we were shuttered back in the fourth quarter of last year, as well as through the summer, extended throughout this year, not just Monday through Friday, but also weekend meal packages that were disseminated and distributed. So a lot of good news as it relates to Nutrition Services and our meal prices for this coming year. What else would you want to add, Mr. Anderson? Anything? Again, thank you to our Nutrition Services team for that heavy lift over the course of this year.
Yeah, the only question I have, Mr. Anderson, is so if I get a second lunch and I'm a student, I'm assuming I'm paying something.
That is correct.
Okay.
It does shift things slightly, and this is a little bit of a challenge for every district in the country. It shifts our ability to truly gauge the need in and around our free and reduced lunch population as to whether that's declining or whether that's increasing. That has implications on how we calculate the foundation formula in the state of Missouri, as well as at the federal level. It has implications there. So if this continues to be the case moving forward, we'll have to rethink how we get to that true number as it relates to our students in need or the diversity that we have socioeconomically, and what that looks like from a free and reduced lunch standpoint, because we're kind of changing those rules, changing the game a little bit. But that's something that we'll keep you updated on as we go.
Yeah, echo from a comment standpoint, your thanks to the USDA for figuring out how to make this happen.
And something that's actually transcended two administrations.
Right.
You don't see too much of that, but politically it has transcended two administrations from the passing of the torch in terms of the change in presidency. So that is quite an accomplishment.
Any other questions? If not, entertain a motion.
I move the board approve the 2021-2022 breakfast and lunch prices.
Second. Second.
Thank you.
Sandra?
Scott?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving into board notes here, Section 8.01, legislation and advocacy. As Dr. Tucker noted, Angie and I had the opportunity to attend the Igniting Great Ideas Summit. Angie also attended the
Delegate Assembly.
Delegate Assembly.
Yes.
Were there great ideas?
There were great ideas. It was probably one of the longest delegate assemblies I've ever attended. I think it took an hour and a half. There was some great conversation. We heard from Roy Blunt. We heard from Margie Van Dieven. We heard from, I feel like there was another person. That was 2 weeks ago. But it took an hour and a half. And we elected new officers.
And clarify, you were tapped on the shoulder to help with some leadership
Oh,
responsibilities.
yeah, but I don't remember what it was.
Okay. Helping organize some of that legislative
Helping
advocacy.
organize advocacy, that's what it was.
From a regional standpoint. We're part of Region 4, as Sandra mentioned, so.
Yeah. I did.
Congratulations, I think.
I did.
Good for you.
Any other comments in regards to legislation and advocacy? Moving into 8.02, upcoming meetings, just a point of note, towards the end of July, again, coming up, July 27th will be our regular board meeting, again, 7 p.m., same place.
Same bat channel.
You could go that route.
No study sessions for the summer?
No study session for the summer, that is correct. 8.03, any board remarks before we move to adjourn?
Just one, before getting here tonight, I was almost late, but I attended the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade production of Jungle Book at the new theater at the Liberty High School. And Fine Arts and Liberty always amazes me. The entire stage, I mean, it was packed. The set design was awesome. The costumes were great. It wasn't quite like going to a Broadway show, but it was close.
And they put it together in 2 weeks.
And it was?
They put it together in 2 weeks.
And they put it together in 2 weeks, yes. My eldest granddaughter was part of this production, so I'm a little biased, but.
Just a little bit.
I had no grandkids when I started this role, and now I'm number 7 on the way, so I've been here too long, but they did a great job, so nice job to Aaron Money and
This whole team.
that entire group.
The other thing to mention, tied to that center stage work over the course of the last several years, I noted specifically, the first session and the performance of Frozen, and then again with Jungle Book, the receptivity of parents and attendants who were grateful to be back face-to-face, supporting their kiddos in theater and fine arts and crew and tech. It's a round of applause for everyone that was involved. It's a 7-day sprint, and then they put on a quick 30, 45-minute performance. So kudos to our fine arts department.
It was packed, parents.
Any other remarks? All right, 9.01.
Move the board adjourn.
Second.
Sandra?
Scott?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.